Somalia is a name which has unfortunately become synonymous with failed state. It's a nation with extremely high levels of poverty, one whose government is barely existent, and notably it's a country racked with violence. But how did this come to be? Why did Somalia fail?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are watching from. I greet you, Africans. How are you doing? I hope you're doing fine where you are, and if you're not doing fine, please do fine where you are. It's good to be fine, and it's never good not to be so fine. Yeah, with all that, I want you to remember one thing. In Africa, we have like 54 African countries. Yeah, maybe we might have another 55th or 56th and country. We have coups everywhere in Africa. Today we have coup in West Africa. Tomorrow we have coup in Southern Africa. The other day we have coup in Eastern Africa, or maybe Northern Africa. You understand? A coup is not something which is foreign with Africa. Destabilized governments is not something which is foreign with Africa. It's something which is synonymous with Africa. You know, I think you've seen those interviews where we have people interviewing white people on their streets of what they think about Africa. Some of the things I hear these people give is that Africa is a place of poverty. Africa is a single country where we have coups everywhere. Africa is a playground for the Europeans. Many people give their answers, and amazingly, all these are true answers. All these are reflections of Africa. But one answer which is so big and which is synonymous to Africa is political instability. There is so much political instability in Africa. In Africa is where you find a president who would want to spend their entire lifetime that God destined them to live on this earth. It's here in Africa where a family will rule a country like a monarchy. We don't have monarchical governments in Africa except for the country of Swaziland. Now we don't have Swaziland, but we have Eswatini. You understand? So some of these 54 countries we have in Africa were fortunate, if we have fortunate in this, because some countries were ruled by a single European country, some other countries were ruled by double European countries or two European powers. For example, is Tanzania. Tanzania was ruled by the Germans. Tanzania was also ruled by the British. We also have South Africa. Predominantly, South Africa was colonized by the British, but we have different superpowers there. We had the Afrikaners. The Afrikaners is a dialect of Netherlands. So we can also see that the Dutch colonized South Africa. By matter of fact, it is the Dutch people who are the first to go to South Africa. So they are the first people to colonize South Africa. And then there's a country that is of keen interest to me. Before I tell you this country, I'm here to tell you that we have a number of countries, like 3 countries in Africa that were never colonized. Do you know what those countries are? We have Ethiopia. Ethiopia won the battalion, a war that was called the Battle of Adwa.
The ancient empire of Ethiopia, also known as Abyssinia. As the world watched, the supposedly primitive Ethiopians were able to repel a modern European army. This defeat was grave and humiliating, and many were puzzled as to how it could have occurred. The Italians were determined to pacify Ethiopia, and they saw their chance when its emperor died and the throne was claimed by the Italian-supported Menelik II. Italy signed a treaty with Menelik that promised backing to his claim, as well as financial and military aid, in exchange for recognition of Italy's colonial territories. However, there were 2 versions of the treaty. One was written in Italian, and the other Amharic, the language of Ethiopia, and each had different terms. The contentious clause, which eventually would lead to the outbreak of war, was in the Italian version of the treaty, which stated that Ethiopia was effectively a colonial protectorate of Italy, a provision that did not exist in the Amharic.
Battle of Adwa. The Battle of Adwa was a very serious defeat to the European government of Italia, or Italy if you like. Here we had King Menelik II beat the Italians with crude weapons. The Italians had superior weapons like guns, machine guns, gunpowder, cannons, but they were still defeated by King Menelik II during the Battle of Adwa. And also other countries we have that were not able to be colonized, but not because they had superior weapons or they had a powerful emperor with them. We have the countries of Sierra Leone, and then we have a country of Liberia. These 2 countries were countries which were freed from the shackles of colonization. This is because after we had the slavery, or rather the slave trade, the French Revolution came. We had the American Civil War, which was majorly the people who were enslaving people were not happy that slavery had been brought to an end. And so after the American Civil War and after the French Revolutions, we had these people brought back to Africa. Not all, but some. If it were all, we wouldn't be having black Americans, but we have black Americans, right? Yeah, so not all of Africans were brought back to Africa, those who were sent to the US, but some of them, those who were brought to these countries, went to the country of Liberia, which is a short of liberty, and also some were taken to the country of Sierra Leone. And if you pay keen attention, you'll notice that the flag of Liberia is like the flag of the United States of America. The only difference is in the number of stars that the flag of Liberia has. Enough said. Now let's go back to Eastern Africa as well. In Eastern Africa, we have countries like Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Sudan, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia. We also have such countries like Tanzania, we have Rwanda, Burundi, and also the DRC joined the East African community. So we can say that the DRC also falls on the Eastern African territory, the countries which are in Eastern, not East, but Eastern. Pay keen attention to that. Somalia has two sides of geographical division. Somalia falls on the Horn of Africa, and also Somalia falls on the eastern side of Africa. Now, if you take a keen look at Somalia, you'll find that Somalia is a unique country within itself. Somalia has had a lot of instability. We have the terror group Al-Shabaab. They reside in Somalia. We have a lot of history with Somalia. If we think of pirates, we think of Somalia. If we think of thugs, we think of Somalia. If we think of Somalia, we know of a city known as Kismayu. Kismayu, I think it's an island in Somalia, a town island that is very notorious for harboring terrorist groups. You understand? Now, these people who have decided that they are not going to have peace, they have decided that any government that is going to rise, they are going to topple it, because everyone has their own ideology. Everyone is an anarchist. You know, an anarchist is somebody who is not a supporter of any government. You understand? When we have anarchy, we have instability. When we have anarchy, we have so many things that are yet to go wrong. So with all this that is going to happen, Somalia had a reason for it to happen. So first of all, we need to understand the history of Somalia. Somalia is a country which is very much troubled with its history. It's a country which has a lot that is not shared. We only know that Somalia is a bad country. But remember, if you want to kill a dog, you give it a bad name. The bad name has been given to Somalia by the West. You understand? Anytime the West is involved in a catastrophe, they tend to label that specific country that is providing or that is causing the condition to be a bad country. Now, there is a Somalia guy that is, we are going to watch his video. He is going to share with us his experience, and he's going to tell us the uncommon knowledge about Somalia and why we have a lot of political instability in this beautiful republic of Somalia. Here is a different perspective. I think we have to listen. Now, without further ado, I want us to dive into this video. Watch it, and then by the end of the video, I shall share with you my thoughts where we shall also have a deep critical analysis. Let's dive in.
The problems with Somalia started immediately after independence. Just before independence, Somalia had been colonized by 3 European powers. We had the French on one side, we had the Italians on one side, and we had the British on one side. Now, just before independence, all the Somalis were asked, do you want to be part of the Greater Somali or you want to be independent? Now, the Somalis on the French side, they said, no, we want to stay on our own. The Somalis on the British side, who are mainly from the clan of Isaac, they voted and they said, we want to be part of the Greater Somalia. So just before independence, the the Ogaden region was given to Emperor Haile Selassie as a gift, and the Northern Frontier District was given to Kenya, and the remaining bit, that is now the British Somalia and the Italian Somalia, were joined and were given independence in 1960. Now, problems started just 6 days after independence, where the Somalis from the British Somalia, that is from the clan of Isaac, they felt sidelined and discriminated, because when key positions of the government were being shared out between the various clans of Somalia, they were sidelined, and they felt they had been neglected, and they felt that they had been discriminated, because the key positions, that is in the judiciary, in the executive, and in the legislature, were given to other clans, and they felt left out. So, and they started regretting immediately why they voted to be part of the Greater Somalia. Now, the Somalis they've always had this dream of having a united Somali, that is a Somali where all the five regions would be joined together to form one great Somali. That is why you have their star, that is why you have their flag with a star with the 5 points, meaning, or rather signifying, the Djibouti, the Somaliland, the Northern Frontier District, Ogaden, and of course Somaliland. That is the 5 regions. So they always looked forward to forming one greater Somalia. So they got their first president, and after some time, the first president was assassinated by his own bodyguard. And after the assassination, the military took over, and there was a coup, and General Said Mohamud Barre became the leader of the country in a military dictatorship. Now, at first, things seemed to be going well. First of all, he had aligned himself with the Soviet Union, so he was getting a lot of support and aid, that is through military and whatever, from the Soviet Union and Cuba. So the General Mahmoud was also always looking forward to unite the Somalis, and he was looking forward to having the Ogaden region of Ethiopia joined to the Greater Somalia. General Mahmoud Said Barre was from the Darud clan, and the majority of people also in Ogaden are from his clan, that is the Darud, and he was looking forward to unite both the regions. In I believe in 1974, Emperor Haile Selassie was overthrown by the military junta in Ethiopia, and we had the Daj, that is a military organization that took over power in Ethiopia, led by Mengistu Haile Mariam. And immediately there were problems in Ethiopia. Once the Emperor Haile Selassie had been overthrown, there was civil strife and so on. So now General Mahmoud took this as an advantage to invade Ogaden in what we call the Ogaden War. First of all, he started funding and arming the Somalis in Ogaden to start a civil war in Ethiopia. And along the way, he decided to start a war with Ethiopia, and he invaded Ethiopia. Actually, he was very successful in the first years. But then again, when he invaded Ethiopia, he was being supported by the Soviet government and Cuba. But then again, the Dutch, that is the military guys who had taken over in Ethiopia, they started aligning themselves with the Soviet Union. You see, firstly, when Ethiopia was under Haile Selassie, Ethiopia had aligned itself with Britain and America. So immediately now when the Dutch took over and they aligned themselves with Soviet Union, now the British and the British and the Americans stopped now giving aid to Ethiopia. Now, remember that Said Barre was being supported and funded and being armed by the Soviet Union. But then now the Dutch in Ethiopia, they called upon the Soviet Union and they told them, hey, we've aligned ourselves with you. We are now communist. I mean, you should not be supporting Somali to fight us. Now, the Soviet Union was at first confused as to who to support, because here they were supporting Said Barre, and now the Dutch in Ethiopia had now become communist. Along the way now they decided, no, we shall stop supporting Somalia. We shall now support the Dutch government in Ethiopia. So the Soviets withdrew their support from Somalia, and they gave their support to Ethiopia. And now they started giving arms to Ethiopia, and they gave them troops and tanks, military equipment. And now the war changed now in the favor of Ethiopia. And Said Barre and his armies were defeated in the Ogaden War. And now they came back. I mean, so many of their soldiers were killed. And it was a total destruction of the Somali army. And now Said Barre now was defeated in Ethiopia, and his troops now withdrew from the Ogaden region, and they came back to now Somalia. And along the way, because you see now, there were some Somalis now of the Darude community, or rather clan, Kabil, who are now in Ethiopia and who had been supported by Said Barre, and now they had to flee Ethiopia because now Ethiopian army had taken over Ogaden, and now this the guys now who are fighting, who are assisting Said Barre, that is the Daru community, the clan in Ethiopia, they started spilling over now to Somalia. And where was Said Barre settling them? Said Barre was now settling them in the Isaac region. That is what we call Somaliland. That is where he was. That is where he was settling them. So there was a big influx of refugees from Ethiopia, and they came now to Somalia. And Said Barre was now hosting them in the region of the Isaac in Somalia. And remember, these are two different clans. We shall continue with this video. Look out for the part 2 on the civil war in Somalia. Thank you.
You know, one thing that I tend to tell people is that before you judge, listen first. You know, you might find yourself to be the one to be judged because you didn't listen. Take time, listen as to why things are happening as they are. Because things happen for two reasons. There's a good reason for that thing to happen, and also we have a real reason. Sometimes these two things we don't understand, and sometimes we might understand either of them. It's good to understand both sides. Many around the world understand that Somalia is a country of instability. Many around the world understand that Somalia is a country that is synonymous to conflicts. We know that Somalia is the home to the Al-Shabaab. But who made the Al-Shabaab? Who really made these people? You know, Africans are suffering the problems of the West. The problems we faced in Africa, most of them are problems that have been caused to us by the West. Colonization has brought about unimportant or unnecessary travel entries. You understand? If a Kenyan wants to travel to Sudan, he needs to provide papers. If a Sudanese wants to travel to Kenya, he has to represent his papers. Anyone in Africa who wants to travel within Africa, is very hard for him. But if an African wants to travel in Europe, it's very easy. You'll find that a bus, or rather a fare ticket, an air ticket of an airliner, say from Ghana from Kenya's Jomo Kenyatta International Airport all the way to Kotoka in Ghana, it's very expensive. But if you calculate the distance, it's not that much. Now, take from Kenya to Dubai. Kenya to Dubai is very cheap as compared to Kenya to Kotoka International Airport, which is very much expensive. It's almost triple the price you would pay from Kenya to Dubai. Why is this happening? Africans, our division is what makes those people unite. And once we realize this, we'll come to understand why it was necessary for the Europeans to have colonized us, and why the Berlin Conference was something that they had to make it, because without the Berlin Conference, their plan would not go as planned. You understand? Somalia is a country that is neighboring Kenya to the northeast. Yeah. And this particular gentleman from the speech, I can tell that he's a person who has traveled across the continent. He understands history very well. You can see that he told us about the Soviet Union. He told us about the European. He told us also about the US. You know, during the Cold War, we had two powers that were fighting one another. This was the US and the USSR, which is the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic and the United States, just to be precise with you. These two countries, or rather these two superpowers, were having ideological differences. The amazing thing is that they were not fighting these fights in their own countries. They were fighting these fights in Africa. You understand? It's like you do something wrong to someone, and then you choose someone who is very neutral. You choose your neighbor's house to bring your conflict. I don't think it's necessary. If you want to fight in the place that in the crime scene. You know, you don't transfer the crime scene to someone else's. That is what the Europeans did, and these specific people are the people who call out for peace, human rights. You know, before you say you want human rights for fellow humans, I think you need to work on yourself first. And the Europeans, who are hypocrites, have to work on themselves first. They are not right in what they do. I believe so. And there's nothing more I can share in this video. I just have only to share with you that this gentleman knows history, and he's here to remind us that the problem we face in Africa are problems that have been passed down to us. Yeah, it's not an inherent problem. It's a problem that has been passed to us by the European powers. That's my message for today. This is EFK, Original Documentaries. If you like what I do, you know what to do. Subscribe, like. You may want to share. Sharing is caring. Give a super thanks. Do some Patreon. I will so much appreciate. Yeah. See you in the next one. And remember, stay black. Love yourself. And remember, the problems we face in Africa are not inherent problems. Are problems which has been passed down by the Europeans. Yeah. That's all for today, guys.